I wrote to cope with my mental illness, with my paranoid schizophrenia. I heard voices, and those voices were not nice. They distracted my thoughts and made me live inside of myself. I lived inside of myself instead of looking at the world and how it was. Instead, I was busy fighting with what the voices were saying. I tried to daydream away from reality, and that was a nice distraction. By daydreaming, I was coming away from reality. By daydreaming I could distance myself from the reality I was living in, and that was a more happy place than living in the real world. I wrote books while coping with my mental illness, and they were a very valuable distraction for me. Without those books to write, or without writing in general, I would be in a worse place mentally, because while I was writing, I was also processing my thoughts. I'm translating the books I wrote when I was sick, and right now the plan is for the next year to translate my books. Hopefully, I will reach that goal by translating 1,000 words a day, and I hope I'm done by the end of 2025. I also heard music to cope with mental illness, and music distracted my mind sometimes, and sometimes the music would become a background noise that actually enhanced my voices. So sometimes music didn't help. I took medicine. I took antipsychotics. I started by taking olanzapine or Celesta, but that didn't work. So medicine didn't always help. My antipsychotics didn't always help. And I took also Abilify, and I took Latuda, and Latuda was the first antipsychotic that actually had a beneficial effect towards me hearing voices. That's when I started to get better, but my medicine didn't always help. I was on Abilify, and I was on Celesta and olanzapine for a long time without any effects, for maybe a year or 2 years. For 1 to 2 years, I wasn't well. For 1 to 2 years, my medicine didn't work, and I had to live with my voices being very loud. My medicine also gave me liver failure. So there's something called a liver count, which for me, when I had liver failure, it was 3,500. My liver count was 3,500, and it has to be 10 to 70. That's a healthy liver count. And if you have a chronic liver illness, your liver count will be around 210. Or if you drank a lot of alcohol, your liver count might be 100, or 140. So my liver count was very critical. I was dying. So my medicine gave me liver failure, and it almost killed me. My medicine almost killed me. My antipsychotics, it was quetiapine. That was the antipsychotic that gave me liver failure. So my antipsychotics gave me liver failure, and my paranoid schizophrenia at its worst was living in a nightmare, and the only way you were out of that nightmare was when you were sleeping and you weren't cognizant of your living. I both hate and love my medicine. I love it now because um, I have amisulpride or Solian now, which reacts with the kidneys, but it also has side effects. So I love it. I love my medicine because it keeps the voices away, and my medicine um, basically allows me to live a life where I can study at the University of Copenhagen. And I hate it because of the side effects. Um, I might have fragile bones because I'm taking this medicine. So at some point, I could break my bones very easily, and that's the downsides of my medicine is that. But also sometimes I have jaw spasms. Sometimes I have my jaw is shaking out of my control, and it feels like it's very painful. My jaw is very painful because I it feels like I'm gonna break my jaw when I have these jaw spasms. But my antipsychotics allowed me to have an education now, and my antipsychotics gave me a better life. But also my antipsychotics often didn't work. It didn't work for years. So I was very ill with paranoid schizophrenia for years. I never wanted something called clozapine, which is one of the oldest and most potent antipsychotics. I didn't want clozapine because I was afraid of the side effects. I was afraid of the side effects of clozapine, that antipsychotic. And I don't want medicine side effects to rule my life. I don't want to be some drooling zombie. I don't want to be a drooling zombie that, you know, doesn't know where they are. And maybe my voices will be gone, but I won't be a human anymore. That's my fear, anyways, is that the medicine side effects are that bad. So that's why I never wanted clozapine. I take Solian or amisulpride now. That's my antipsychotic, and that's because I had liver failure, because I almost died taking my other antipsychotics. So I got that, and fortunately, it also works to keep the voices away. So it's very efficient for making me well. But yeah, I take amisulpride because of my liver failure, because there's no other medicine in the world that will both treat my schizophrenia and not give me liver failure. So in that way, I don't have many options for medicine. I don't have many options for antipsychotics. I feel like I'm in a good place despite my chronic illness. I am happy where I'm at now, because I'm studying at university. I wrote my books, I'm translating my books, and I just feel very comfortable in my own skin. And that is thanks to my antipsychotics. I also want others to believe that things can get better, because for 1 to 2 years I lived in an absolute nightmare. For 1 or 2 years I was in a living nightmare, and I want people to think that there is hope, even though you might have to wait a long time before something happens. I was treated, so the way I was treated was not in psychiatry. I only have had 2 hospitalizations in psychiatry, and the first one was the first time I had schizophrenia and I heard voices. I was hospitalized for 1 to 2 months, but then I got out and I was even more sick after I had been hospitalized for schizophrenia. I was sicker after hospitalization than I was when I was hospitalized. But I also had uh, another hospitalization. I was hospitalized with liver failure, the liver count being 3,500, and it has to be 10 to 70. So I was hospitalized with liver failure, and then for a week, I was hospitalized for a week with liver failure, and then for another week, I was hospitalized in psychiatry because they had to figure out some medication they could try on me that wouldn't give me liver failure. So I was hospitalized for 2 weeks, and that's my second hospitalization, and I've only had two. So I feel very um, grateful that I've only been in psychiatry 2 times. But I should probably have been in psychiatry for longer, but I was treated in something called an ambulatory, which is basically you are connected to psychiatry, but you live on your own. So you live in your own apartment or whatever. So um, that way of being in psychiatric treatment is all about you just have some appointments and you have a contact person and you have a doctor. So they try out medicine while you are not hospitalized. I spent a lot of time reflecting on my thoughts when I was schizophrenic. Um, Basically, I had to figure out what thoughts were my voices and what thoughts were my own thoughts, because there was a difference, because the voices destroyed my own thought process and the voices became some of my thoughts. I also had to I had to unlearn negative automatic thoughts, which is basically, so if the voices said I sucked, then I had to unlearn this thought pattern in my own head that said I suck. So in that way, I had to unlearn a lot of thoughts and a lot of thought patterns. I had to remove the brainwash of my voices by saying I don't suck, even though before I had thought I suck because of what I heard the voices saying. My voices had traumatized my thoughts. They had made it hard for me to understand what was my thought and what was a voice's thought, because those were mixed together. And my voices broke my mind, and I had to rebuild myself, and I had to rebuild my mind. I had to rebuild myself and my identity by basically saying to myself every day, okay, what the voices said, that's not true, and this is the truth. So I had to keep saying, this is who I am, despite what the voices had said, or despite the thoughts, the negative thoughts I'd had. And I rebuilt my identity by becoming a writer, by writing poems, by writing short stories, and just being creative. I rebuilt myself by not caring about other people's opinion. I didn't care that people thought, oh yeah, schizophrenic people are bad, or schizophrenic people are crazy, or, all those opinions and all of that stigma. I had to kind of push that stigma aside, and I had to think for myself, who am I and what do I care about? And one of the things was, I don't care about what other people think. I became a writer that writes books and not just poems. And I'm very happy about that because writing a book is a project. You gotta go from the start to the finish writing a book. While writing a poem, before, I mostly just wrote poems. And so writing one poem is one project, but writing a poetry collection is taking all of these poems and collecting them, but also making them in the same style or whatever. So it's a bigger project, it's a bigger scope to write a poetry collection, to write a book. So I'm stronger after my psychosis because now I write books. Now I'm happier about who I am and the things I've been through. And I'm grateful for the experience to hear voices because now I experience another part of life. I experience tragedy, hearing voices, and that has made me more reflective and allowed me to think more about who I am and what I think. And it's made me a stronger person to have experienced chronic psychosis, to have experienced hearing voices. And I went through a personal journey, hearing voices, living in a nightmare, to becoming gradually more and more well, to the point where I didn't really hear voices. I still hear voices, but it's not as bad, and it's more of a background noise, and it's more something that comes and goes. My voices come and go, and I rarely can hear them, but it's just background noise. So my voices are background noise that annoys me sometimes. I also have insomnia, so I take sleep medication whenever I go to sleep. So it doesn't always work that well sometimes. For example, yesterday when I tried to sleep, I was staying awake for 1 to 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours before I actually fell asleep, even though I had taken sleep medication. Um, that's because I have racing thoughts. My thoughts just keep going, maybe because of my schizophrenia, maybe because I'm smart, or maybe because I just worry a lot or think a lot. But that's probably the reason for my insomnia, maybe the schizophrenia. I hope you all have a nice day.